everyone this evening? All good? It's good to be here. So who in the audience is familiar with the concept of group buying? Show of hands. Anyone familiar with it? Keep your hand up if you've heard of Spreets before. That's good. Keep your hand up if you've bought something from Spreets before. Even better. Well, hopefully by the end of the night I've convinced you all to actually get on there and buy something off us, because it's a great concept. Just a little bit, as mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spreets. For those people that haven't had the pleasure of buying something off Spreets, and maybe don't know too much about the space, let me explain a little bit about it. Every day, over 1 million people have already registered at spreets.com.au to receive an email off us. And attached to that email is an idea for something interesting to do in their city. It could be a restaurant, a day spa, an event, or something else that's great in this wonderful city of ours. And the interesting thing about that is, attached to that idea, that interesting idea, is a discount of something between 50 to 90% off. And that discount only activates if a minimum number of people actually jump on and buy the deal at the same time. So there's this huge viral referral. There's this huge amount of people who go and talk about the deal on Facebook and Twitter and email, and they refer their friends to our site. And it's how we've managed to grow so quickly in such a short period of time. Spreets was the first group buying site in Australia, and it only launched in February of last year. It was on my birthday, actually, 4th of February, and it turned out being a pretty damn good birthday present in the end. But it's in such a short time. You know, we've grown from, in our first month, I think we did $4,000 revenue, and then in just January of this year, we were acquired by Yahoo 7, and we were turning over about $4 million a month in that month. So a huge amount of growth. We've now got over 1 million members in our database, and it's a massively growing, huge industry. But that's all boring. You might have read that in the newspapers. The thing that you guys probably want to hear is how do I do this? How do I work this stuff out so I can do it next time? What trends do I need to look at? What do I need to watch? Who do I need to read to find out, to identify that next big thing that's going to make you, a bucket of money? And there's all kinds of trends that fed into the success of group buying and Spreets in general. Disintermediation is something that the internet does really well, taking out the middleman essentially. And what group buying does is the money that advertisers, that merchants would normally spend on advertising, is given to the consumer as a discount. So it's taking out that middleman and creating a new way of doing things. So the internet's always been great at that. But, there's all kinds of boring trends that we can talk about. And the truth is, the reality is that a true internet startup, an early stage technology company, can't look at trends to build a business. By the time someone's up here talking about it, by the time it's read in the newspaper, the trend is over. The opportunity's missed. And so I've always said that the way to identify the next big opportunity and the next big thing that you could work on and take away from this is by getting close to the problem. So I've lived and breathed the problem of how do businesses get customers from the internet. And as mentioned, I lived and breathed this the first time when I owned a bar and restaurant. And I used to spend thousands of dollars on advertising that didn't work. And, Spreets in general is a little bit like the radio rep walking into your business and saying, I'm going to run free ads for you and only charge you when customers walk through the door. So it's a real game-changing kind of scenario. The next time I was working on this same problem was my next startup, which was Booking Angel. So I basically had felt a problem when I was running the bar and restaurant of getting reservations from the internet. I knew technology really well. I'd worked in technology companies for a long time, but I didn't... I used to miss emails that came in. I used to miss bookings. We'd had function bookings and things that had come in via email, and I'd missed them. And so we came up with a solution with Booking Angel where you made a reservation on the internet, it converted it to a voice message and phoned the business. And the business got a phone call, and with speech recognition technology, read the reservation out to them and allowed them to respond to it, accept it, reject it, or suggest an alternate time. So a really simple way of solving a problem. And I had some success with it here in Australia and overseas, but basically spent a lot of time banging my head against the brick wall, they might say. So I couldn't raise money here in Australia. It was a very difficult environment. I was new. I hadn't run a startup before, so a lot of learning and a lot of mistakes were made, I guess, in the early days. But I guess then I moved over to Silicon Valley. So I lived over there, and it's kind of there where I noticed a real change in culture between the Australian environment and the US environment. In Australia, almost talking about failure especially in the early days, is not acceptable. I felt like when I was talking to investors and things like that, you'd say, oh, we did this and it didn't work, and then they'd stop listening to you. Whereas over there, they really extracted out of you what are the things you've tried that haven't worked, because each step in the wrong direction was a step in the right in their eyes. And so my mind opened up when I went over to the US, and I found I'd try things and then they wouldn't work, but that would get me closer to what I want. And I knew that the holy grail of what I was trying to do with Booking Angel was about, I knew that if we switched it on, when we switched it on for a restaurant or a business, they would get a few reservations a week off us in the beginning. So they never really loved us. They never really changed their lives. They never really had a huge impact immediately on their life. Eventually, we'd get more and more reservations, but it happened slowly, so they never attributed that to the efforts that we went to. So I knew the holy grail was switching it on and driving a lot of reservations to a business in a short period of time. And I was trying all kinds of things to do that. We were experimenting with special offers, and I was in a conversation with a very clever angel investor in Silicon Valley where I was explaining all the things we'd done to try and solve this problem. And he goes, it's funny you should say that. I just invested in this startup in Chicago. They're just getting started, but they've kind of been really successful at driving a lot of traffic to restaurants and day spas and other things in a short period of time, and that was Groupon. And I saw that in the very early days before they, he was one of their seed investors, I think, and so it was very early before they'd proven any success. But I knew that that was the silver bullet we were looking for in our business, and I quickly came back to Australia, realising it was a great opportunity that we had to seize while we're here. So it was in a conversation with Phil and Mick, and I think Mick's backstage, so I won't steal too much of his thunder, but it was at a Christmas party with Phil, and I managed to get him drunk enough that Phil and Mick start a business called Pollinizer, which is like an incubator for startups in Australia. So I managed to get Phil drunk enough that he agreed to partner with me and build Spreets in the early days. It happened to be over Christmas when they had a few spare people kind of to do some work for us, and sure enough they said we'll build a site, but it's got to be live and making revenue by the end of February. If it's not, we're going to shut it down. So the pressure was on, and I got on the phone, did a lot of sales, and thankfully things took off. And it was in about May of 2010 that we raised a little bit of angel investment. Unfortunately, it wasn't in Australia. I tried to pitch a few angels here, but there were some European investors that just acted quickly. They saw the opportunity, and from the first phone call to them to the money in the bank was 2 weeks. So it's a good lesson for the investors in the room. In order to seize the big opportunities, you've got to move fast. And the overseas guys know it, and we've got to learn and adapt and become better at it here. So we raised some money from some European angels, and then the site was taking off. Our business plans were we're either really bad at doing business planning, or we knew we were onto a big model because we underestimated. It's the first time I've ever seen a business model that's underestimated, but we certainly underestimated the sort of revenue that we would be doing. It was in about September, November, we started getting approached by people about acquisition, and it was then that we were like, my co-founder and I, Eustace Hammer, and myself sat down and were like, well, what are we going to do? What's the next game-changing thing that we need to do to embrace and maintain our market leadership position? And we looked at the options in media companies here in Australia. We got offers from overseas, and we knew that Yahoo 7 was a good selection with their online media assets and their television and magazines, that taking this mainstream and making it become more of a household name was an important part of the future. We'd already been successful and beaten the other media companies in the market. So, our competitors have been spending huge amounts of money on TV advertising, and we were still outselling them because we knew the mechanics of what it took to grow a business virally, what it took to encourage people to come to the site and refer their friends. So we decided to do that deal, and again, in the fast-moving pace of the group buying industry, we had our first discussions with Yahoo 7 in November, December, and the deal was closed in January. So it was a pretty crazy Christmas time, but in the end, it ended up being a good birthday present again a year after. So an exciting ride we've been on. And, the company's grown from 2 of us to, I think we just hired our 76th person yesterday. So a huge amount of growth. And, I guess the one thing, or the one thing I want you to take away from this is probably about, some of you might have ideas for starting startups in Australia, and I encourage, and it's great that there's so many creative people in a room, sharing ideas and stories around this. The one lesson I've learned is that you always need to improvise and you always need to iterate quickly. This presentation is a good example of that. So you never know what you've got to do next and how you've got to spin it and improvise it and make the best of it when you're in front of it. And that's a good lesson. It's a good sort of metaphor for how to run a startup. But the other thing I say to people is that doing a startup in Australia is a little bit like trying to grow a plant in a dark cupboard. It's really bloody hard. There's not the nutrients. There's not the nutrients or the resources you need to grow. But the great thing about that is when you're one of the people who's growing that plant, when you are that plant, and you get taken out and put into the sunlight and given the nutrients you need, we have some amazing, intelligent, wonderful startups here in Australia that when given those opportunities, grow and flourish. And I think it's it's why international investors are starting to look here. Just recently in the last 6 months, companies like Atlassian and 99 Designs and Ozsale and a few others have all had large investments from top tier US investors, and I think it's great because it's just a testament to the wonderful people that are starting startups in Australia and starting global businesses. The one thing I would say is it would be great if we could build that expertise here in Australia too, that if we could embrace more of the early stage startup investment community, then those little plants that become the wonderful growth big companies, the resources and the investments made in them early on could be reinvested back into Australia, and it would be great for the digital economy. That's my little political spiel for the evening, but thank you very much.